All right, hello guys. How are you all? For anyone rewatching this or anyone joining the stream, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you celebrate, or if you're just having a normal day, I hope you're having a fantastic day. And yeah, for those people that missed the stream, or I guess missed this stream, or was wondering where I was earlier this morning, and then I also had a stream posted at 8 o'clock, and I wanted to get those, but just didn't have the time. This morning just was extremely tired, had a lot going on. I was gonna try to stream in between doing, me and my parents, like our Christmas stuff at the beginning of the morning, and then we also had family coming over at like around midday, so just didn't get to it, unfortunately. And then I wanted to stream at 8 o'clock because I thought I'd be done by then. People didn't leave by till about 6, and then I also had to completely overhaul my entire setup, redo all of it because, as you guys can maybe tell by the way the camera looks, I have a completely different setup now. As you guys knew or know, at some point I had a setup where I had a standing desk type situation, and it kind of looked, a little different. But I more or less got for Christmas a standing desk, or at least a desk that's adjustable. It's not like a straight up just standing desk at all times. I can also bring it down. I can sit in this desk as well. But yeah, so I basically spent the last hour and a half just trying to get all this all back together so that I could do a little stream for you guys tonight. And yeah, we're just gonna hang out a little bit, talk about A Feast for Crows, and that's about it. Just gonna be a nice chill stream. And kind of just to kind of rationalize my own thoughts because I am going to be doing a review. So yeah, but hi Ashley, how are you? How was your day? Hope you had a fantastic one. But yeah, so gonna be kind of a chill stream. We're gonna talk about Feast for Crows, kind of my overview, what things I kind of took away from it. And I kind of want to hear your guys' thoughts. It's like I'm going through all of the POVs. What do you guys think? If you guys agree with me, if not, I don't expect this to be a big stream, given that it's way later than I normally stream, and also, YouTube didn't send out a notification for the stream, just given that I've tried scheduling the stream like a couple times. But yeah, my day was great. Ate way too much, lol. And how was your Christmas? Yeah, I am in the same boat, Ashley. I ate a little too much. I won't lie, a little too much. But it was good. It was a little really tired. Let's put it that way, really tired. But yeah, because we got up at like 8 a.m. today to do breakfast and presents and stuff. And so I'm not a morning person. It's not the time I usually wake up, so I was really tired from that. And then I took like a 2 hour, or not 2 hour, like an hour nap, just to make it through when people were coming over. But yeah, it was good. You get anything cool for Christmas, Ashley? The main things, you guys can see both of them for the most part. The one thing is that I got a TV for my room. It's not anything crazy, but it's like right there. Still trying to figure out that situation because my bed's actually higher than what I was going to put it on right now. So kind of a weird situation over there. And then, here, I'll just show you guys a little, hold on. So this is what we're working with. It's very like high off the ground. And this is my old desk. So yeah. It's kind of hard to show you like without going to like a phone or something, but more or less this is way higher than it usually is. Like I'm standing, as you guys can tell, and the camera's at like eye level. But yeah, that's mainly what I got. I got some books. I'm really excited to read this one because this is one I saw and I wanted to look at, but I got this book, Game of Thrones philosophy book. I believe this is from the people that do the History of Westeros podcast or something along those lines. So I'm not sure if that is correct or not. Okay, that might not be correct, but I think there may be part of it. I don't know. But I'm excited to look at that. Hi Matthew, how are you? Merry Christmas as well. Even that Stark hater in the stream. Okay, I'm gonna be honest, Matthew. I was just saying some wild stuff. I don't hate the Starks or anything, I was just getting a little wild with it. Ooh, do you love to see that, Ashley? Did you get the cookbook? No, I will say though, so my parents got me another, hold on. These are the other two books my parents got me, but they got me this, which is what I really wanted, because I want to read this. I haven't read it. I've read the main Hunger Games books. And then my parents also got me another version of the book 1, so it's kind of useful because my nice version that I have, like you guys can see it right there, my nice version is kind of falling apart just because I've had to use it so much for like keeping pages open and doing my book reviews, like for my analysis. It's kind of been kind of tearing them apart, to be honest, and like it's kind of coming out of the binding. So yeah, that'll kind of be useful. But yeah, so you know, be nice. Matthew, you get anything for Christmas? But while we do that, let's talk about A Feast for Crows. So A Feast for Crows is a book that to me is so weird because I think on one hand, it is very not loved by more of the casual audience of A Song of Ice and Fire. And so by casual, I mean people that have maybe, you know, read the books maybe once or twice. They're not too in depth with the lore. Like if you ask them, what did Maegor the Cruel do during his reign? Probably not going to be able to tell you. Those type of people, I feel like, and again, the casual fan base don't particularly like A Feast for Crows because A Feast for Crows deals with a lot of the side plots, right? Like if you're going off of the end of A Storm of Swords, your main plot lines are really like Sansa, Arya, Jaime, like Tyrion, Dany, Jon, like those are kind of your main ones, right? And so I was gonna say Cersei, but Cersei wasn't a POV yet, but like it's kind of like Jaime, Tyrion. And so the thing with A Feast for Crows is Feast for Crows takes all of that and does the opposite. So like for instance, Arya and Sansa, two major POVs throughout the first 3 books, they're completely down to 3 POVs each, which I think is a good change, but for a casual audience, may not like that. So the next part of this is going to be, okay, let's look at who the main POVs of this book are, right? The 3 main POVs that take up bulk majority of this book, over 50% of the book. Brienne, Jaime, and Cersei. So the big problem with A Feast for Crows, if you're a casual fan, is that if you don't buy into one of those 3 POVs, this is going to be kind of a rough book for you. Also, why is my camera kind of like struggling to focus? There it goes. But yeah, so if you're someone that doesn't buy into one of those 3 POVs, right? And so for instance, put it this way, Brienne, right? For me, it takes a while to get into her, right? Like she is someone that has interesting parts about her going into it, but she doesn't really hit her stride until end of chapter 4, chapter 5. So the problem becomes you have such a focus on 3 characters. And I went back because I was curious. I was curious to see if any of the other books to this point had such a drastic POV like difference in chapters, as in 3 POVs correlate to over 50% of the book, and that's nowhere to be found. And it's kind of crazy when you think about a Game of Thrones when Ned has so many chapters. Or you think about Arya in book 3. None of the other books have this difference of we have such an overwhelming amount of just 3 POVs. And so I think that is something that would deter someone, where it's like, okay, we have Cersei, who not everybody loves to read, which I definitely understand. We're going to talk about Cersei when we look at like her POV specifically, but you know, you have that issue. But then you also have the other issue, which is something I find interesting, is like the Greyjoy and Dornish plot. I've seen that a lot of people actually say they don't like those plot lines. And they feel like they take too long or something like that, which I find very interesting given that, like, they're not actually in the book very much. Like, yes, we see the Greyjoy plot and the Greyjoy and the Dornish plot. You have about 3 to 4-ish chapters within the first half of the book, which is a decent amount, right? That's about, I think it's like 6 to 8 chapters in that range in the first half of the book. But then after that point, right, after the halfway point, you have 1 chapter for Victarion. You have 1 chapter for Arianne, and that's it. And so I think really what people are saying is, and why they struggle to get through Feast for Crows so much, is that it inherently has more of the newer plots, the side plots, front-loaded in the front of the book. So you notice them a lot more going into it. But yeah, I mean, I don't blame you, Ashley, for that being your favorite book, because I think something I've noticed is the hardcore fan base, the people that reread the books a lot, the people that go on YouTube, that look up this content, I tend to find that there are what am I trying to say? There's way more amount of people that actually enjoy A Feast for Crows, because A Feast for Crows is a book that inherently has much deeper themes. It has a different spin on the themes that we have in the first three books, where the first three books is not really about, wartime, what it does to people. Like, Feast for Crows is a reflection book where it looks at, okay, what has war done to men, humans, people? How has it affected everyone? It has this other theme that Dance is really going to focus on. I think one of the things, I'm already starting to reread Dance, and the big theme you really feel in the first couple chapters is the idea of ruling in peace and the struggles of that. How do you manage all these personalities? And that's something Cersei deals with as well. So it's that different flip on that, where A Feast for Crows is more about feast time, or not feast time. That's a good clippable moment. It's more about peacetime, but yeah. So, I had the version your parents got you. Yes, so it's kind of the OG version, but I'll be looking into it. I just wish they were bigger. They don't like small books because of how big the book is. It's the only size you can get. Yeah, fair enough. Merry Christmas, Haley. Hope you had a fantastic day. Just money and water bottles, nothing too much. What kind of water bottles did you get? Like, did you actually get like bottled water, or did you get like water bottles that you can like fill up water? Okay, Matthew. Well, that'd be cool. That'd be cool. Christmas has come. Viserys was having a great time. That's all I'm going to say. Do you think that Feast might have been one of George's favorite works, as it deals both with aftermath of conflicts and shows why he does not like conflict, and also more political intrigues? I think so, right? Like, I think the one thing that maybe George, you would like say maybe George doesn't like this book as compared to others, is because Tyrion's not in it. And George has stated, like, Tyrion's one of his favorite POVs to do. So maybe on that account, maybe not. But I would say, yeah, I think, like, Feast for Crows gives me a lot of George vibes. It just has all of those things in there, like, layered in there, that I think really fit what George is going for. Merry Christmas Ghost as well. Those are my favorite song, or A Feast for Crows plots. And I agree, actually. Like, I think the strongest plots in the book are, one, Jaime. Like, throughout, Jaime has the best plot from first chapter to the last chapter. He has no bad chapter in this book. Every chapter you get of Jaime is insanely interesting. They move the plot forward. There's never like a filler chapter that you feel like with Jaime. Whereas like Brienne, she kind of has those to begin the book. Jaime doesn't have those, right? And so that's what I find really interesting. And then, you look at the Dornish plot and the Feast, or the Ironborn plots. I think they're really rich with interesting political intrigue. And I think the real issue with those plots, when it comes to someone that is a casual reader of the series, is the problem is you go from such a high moment of Tywin's death, Tyrion killing him. How is Tyrion going to be affected by that? You have Jon becoming the Lord Commander. You have Dany taking over Meereen, or dragons are getting bigger. She's, gaining power and influence. And then we start A Feast for Crows, and it's Pate, which is, again, a good start. And then you have instantly two POVs of plots we've never had before. And then you finally get to Cersei, which is kind of the plotline we wanted to learn the most about, probably. And so it's weird, because A Feast for Crows, I think if you're someone looking for the wrong things, you kind of get bored very early. But also, Ashley, thank you for stepping in. Appreciate you as always. You have to give A Feast for Crows credit. It kept the series well alive after the Red Wedding, which to both readers and show viewers thought was not possible. That's true, all right? Like, that's another thing you have to tackle is A Feast for Crows, and this is something that I'm really going to hammer on when I do my review of A Feast for Crows. And I kind of do that concluding last video, because I've already done the last recording of the last couple of chapters that you guys haven't seen yet. I've already got that recorded, so that'll be edited, and it'll probably be out this week. But the thing is, it's like, how do you reestablish all the plot lines and how do you refocus the narrative while making it interesting? And it definitely did not do as well as a Game of Thrones did and all of that, but a Game of Thrones and a Feast for Crows are so similar. Because yes, the themes are different. You know, the way George writes them is, different. Like a Game of Thrones is written more of like a mystery, finding out, all of these mysteries that have been built up. A Feast for Crows and Game of Thrones are similar in the way that they're setting up all of our characters to do something. So again, first book is about establishing Dany as this mother of dragons, gaining confidence, being a Khaleesi, gaining all that confidence, those personality traits. Book 1 for Jon was about trying to figure out who he was, what was his place in this world, him going to the Night's Watch, all those things. And so when you go to Feast for Crows is about establishing a Greyjoy plotline, establishing who Victarion is, who Euron is, who Asha is, who Aeron is. Dorne plotline. It's about establishing Arianne going forward as she's going to be a major player, establishing Doran and all of Dorne's stuff going on. And so a lot of that kind of feels the same as Game of Thrones. It's just that Game of Thrones, we're more invested in on those characters, and George has to do more work to build those characters. And so that kind of feels very similar. If we even look at Cersei, right? We've only seen Cersei from other people's POVs. So in a similar kind of light, we have to see Cersei being built up similar to the way Ned is. So Cersei is kind of like our counter to Ned, right? Where Ned was main POV throughout the first book. Cersei is the main POV of this book. And so a lot of those same beats are very similar. We're preparing for war once again because of Cersei's misrule. She's not uniting the kingdoms. And so we're going to see probably another war break out. And another war was going to break out regardless of what Cersei probably did, given Dany coming over and maybe even young Griff as well. So all of that is very apparent, but it just shows you when you look at kind of how the series is going. It's really just a replay. We're doing a replay. Whereas book 1 and again Feast for Crows are also very similar in their heights and their lows. Because the Feast for Crows, in my opinion, the problem with Feast for Crows is it doesn't have a lot of high moments. Like, it has them, right? It does have them. I'm not saying it doesn't, but compared to a book like A Storm of Swords, has a lot of high moments. A Clash of Kings has a decent amount of high moments. Game of Thrones has not as many high moments as those next two books, but it has a bit more than Feast for Crows. And the thing, like I say about Game of Thrones that we always talk about is, like, it is the most, I think, consistently written book of the entire series, where if this is a line, Game of Thrones sticks at this line or goes up, usually. There's maybe 1 or 2 chapters that I'd put below the line of, like, a good chapter, and that's just how it is. Now, the only difference between A Feast for Crows and Game of Thrones is Feast for Crows does not have nearly as many, like, higher moments above the line. There's a lot of good chapters in A Feast for Crows. There's not a lot of great chapters in a Game of Thrones, or in A Feast for Crows, not a Game of Thrones. Like, there are ones, right? There are ones that definitely stick out. Like, for instance, Arianne's chapter, the Queenmaker chapter, top 5 chapter of the book. The King's Moot is a top chapter of the entire series. Jaime and the Blackfishes chapter, I believe that's Jaime 6, if I'm not mistaken. Really good chapter. Cersei, I would even say like 1 and or 10, pretty good. But then there's a lot of chapters where they're just good, right? They're solid. There's nothing crazy about them. They're good, right? Like a lot of Cersei's middle chapters, they kind of start to blend together. They're fine. Like, they're not bad chapters. They're just right there at that line. And so that's the way I feel a lot about with A Feast for Crows, is it's just a Game of Thrones, but done a little worse in my opinion. And so when we get to A Dance with Dragons, I think A Dance with Dragons is going to have the same argument. It's going to have the same argument, but it's going to be close to A Clash of Kings. Because The Clash of Kings, I think the biggest argument with The Clash of Kings is it has a lot of highs and it has a lot of lows, right? If you think about Dany's plot, this is probably her weakest book. Think about Jon in Clash of Kings, maybe his weakest book. So you have some of those lows, but you also have a ton of highs. And A Dance with Dragons, in my opinion, is the same way. You have a lot of highs, you have a lot of lows. And so A Winds of Winter, hopefully, is going to be a lot of highs. that's kind of how I look at the series right now, where it almost feels like we're just going back in time again. But also, yes, it came out in 2005. Hi, Dirty Dan, how are you? But nice, Matthew. Okay, so I haven't been reading Feast yet, but is it true that Cersei's chapters are kind of funny because you see her making all bad decisions from her point of view, but she thinks, yeah, Cam, that's one of the very ironic parts is like we see how awful Cersei is. Like she's not dumb, but she is dumb, right? Like it's such a weird thing because she's someone that's so narcissistic. Like, for instance, there's this running plot line in Cersei's chapters where like she'll say her dresses are too tight or they must have gotten shrunken, and she'll blame it on somebody else, right? But in reality, it's because Cersei is drinking heavily. She's becoming more of an alcoholic. She's gaining weight. That's why her dresses aren't fitting. So there's a lot of that, right? There's a lot of like she blames other people for things that she's doing type stuff. And it's something that's great because in the first couple Jaime chapters, it's something Jaime notes. It's one of the reasons Jaime is starting to go away from Cersei because he doesn't like the person that she is, right? Like, yes, he's still attracted to her, but he hates her as a person. It's kind of one of those things where it's like, if you ever think about someone that is like really attractive, but they have an awful personality, that's kind of what Jaime is dealing with Cersei right now. Added on the fact that he has a lot of like trauma with her, right? Like, she quite literally has mentally abused Jaime quite a lot and manipulated him. That's even what we see as the payoff at the end of Jaime's storyline is him saying, no, I'm not doing this manipulation anymore. Where was, her saying that she loved me in the first chapter when she was treating me like garbage? So there's a lot of that in the Cersei chapters. Feast is my favorite one. Cersei plotline was so fun to read, and Jaime at Riverrun is dope. Yes, that's my thing. I think, again, Jaime is just a fantastic character in this book. The one thing I will say is, again, Cersei's plot, I think, is good, right? It's definitely not one of the worst POVs of this book. But there comes a point after, like, I think the third or fourth chapter, between her fourth chapter and, like, her eighth chapter, where it all kind of seems to run together, where it's kind of a lot of the same, right? It's just her kind of being petty. It's her like plotting things that aren't necessarily that important. Like there's an entire Bronn plot line in this book, but it's not really that important as of right now. It could be more important as we go forward, but do you think introducing Fagon and Feast would have been better? Maybe it would have enabled that plot to progress further in Dance. So it could have definitely, yeah. The question is like, how would you have done it, right? Like, because the issue is you have to change the entire plot line if you're gonna do that, right? Like, you're gonna have to have Tyrion be a POV in this book, or you're either gonna have to go to Jon Con. So maybe what you do is you have a Jon Con chapter like midway through this book, and it's kind of a reveal in that regard, right? Like that he's Aegon or something like that. I don't know if that would have made it better though. I don't know, like, because the problem is if you take out that part from Tyrion's arc, because I'm not sure what part of this you're trying to do, Can. I'm not sure if you're trying to rewrite like Tyrion's whole like plot line, or if you're just saying let's get more content before Young Griff meets Tyrion. But if you take away the Tyrion plot line, like say you rework it and you have just Young Griff is introduced earlier. Tyrion, in my opinion, his best chapters are with Young Griff. Like I think Tyrion is pretty solid all the way up until he leaves Young Griff, and that's when I think his plotline really falls off for me. The year you were born, Ghost, you are a youngin'. Oh my, you are a youngin'. Merry Christmas, not sure as well. It really puts into perspective on how late George is with Wins, since A Feast for Crows and Dance were to be one book and it's taken double the time. Well, I think this is what's interesting, right, Matthew? If you think about Dance with Dragons, it comes out in 2011. So in reality, it took George 11 years to write basically the fourth book in the series, right? Given that we know it's supposed to be one book, that's a very interesting thing to think about. And another interesting thing to think about is like, he had a lot of the material written out for a Dance already. He just kind of had to rework it. And so when you put that into perspective, and we're sitting here, after 2011, and it's now 2023 going on 2024, and we're almost 13 years away from that book's release, kind of puts that in perspective. It's like, in reality, we're really not that far off of like George's release time for the last book, really. I find that very interesting and puzzling to think about, because it's like, Dance was a book that he just had to rework how things worked, like the timing of things. Brienne and Arya have some great chapters. Brienne especially has a good arc. Loved her running into the mountain at the Sept. Yeah. So, or the Hound, I believe, is what you mean, Will. But yes. Yeah, so looking at this, I think Brienne's arc to me is one of the hardest ones to look at, because by the end of the book, her last 4 chapters are some of the, like, I have chapter 5, chapter 6, chapter 7, and chapter 8 of Brienne's arc, all within the top 15, I believe, of my chapter rankings of this book. The issue is that her first 4 are just hard to get through. They're very long. The plot doesn't go anywhere. There isn't any focus for Brienne's character at the very beginning. She's chasing after things we know she's not going to get. There's no real mysteries. And so I think that's the biggest problem, is that, like, when you think about the beginning of the book, you have very few Sansa and Arya chapters, right? So that's something you got to already think about, right? There's basically one Arya and Sansa chapter every third of the book. And so when you put that into perspective of, okay, Brienne starts out pretty slow. Cersei is pretty good and Jaime are pretty good early on. But if you don't buy into the Dornish and Greyjoy plot, like I see a lot of more casual readers not, I think it really puts into perspective why people wouldn't like this book that much. And I think if you even put in Sam, we haven't even talked about Sam in this stream because he's so forgettable and bad in this book. Like, Sam is the only POV that I will straight up say in this book is bad. I don't like Sam in this book. He was by far the character I hated rereading. The only 2 chapters I really like had any enjoyment of actually reading was his first chapter and his last chapter. Why is that? Because he gets to Old Town and we've never been there, and it's super interesting outside of the first chapter in the book. So that's really cool. There's a lot of intrigue going on, tying back to Pate's chapter at the beginning of the prologue. So that's really good with the end chapter. The end chapter is very good. The first chapter is great because it kind of, again, reminds us of what's going on in the North. It's interesting because it puts into our mind, like, wow, Jon's making some very controversial decisions that we just don't understand. And it builds up Jon's POV really well. Because we're sitting here, we're going, okay, these are some interesting decisions. Jon's not really explaining why he's making like this decision or that decision. And Sam starts to kind of resent him. Like, think about that. Sam, who is Jon's closest friend, starts to question that. So, like, all of that I think is really good. But in between that, right, we have Sam on a ship. They're going past Skagos. Okay. We have him in Bravos, which can be interesting, but it's extremely long. It's a lot of complaining. The only good parts I enjoy about it is like his brief encounter with Arya, and some of the Aemon stuff is really good. Like, the very few Aemon lines or things we get with Aemon in Sam's chapters are very good. But I think the problem I have is, like, we could have skipped the entire Sam arc in this book outside of his last chapter. Like, we could have literally just had this, right? We could have not had the Sam chapter at all in the beginning and then just had him be the epilogue. Like, what's the difference between making Sam like a 30-page, 40-page epilogue at the very end of the book? You explain his journey, whatever he's been on, explain how Aemon died, and then have the epilogue play out how it plays out. Because in reality, I find the first Sam chapter to be really interesting, but it's not necessary. We get Jon's chapter that basically recounts everything that goes on in Sam's in the next book anyway. So, I don't know. Do you think Daemon Lannister will survive? He seems like a really nice guy for a Lannister, exactly the kind of person Martin will kill in his story to make a point. So I think what could be interesting is if we have this Revenge Red Wedding and Daemon is someone that could die, it would really make that even more brutal. Like, this is someone that, again, like you pointed out, seems like a really nice guy. It would be interesting if he did die. Like, I don't know. But I do think so. I think it's possible that we see him die. Sam was tough to get through. Agreed, Will. Agreed. I think that Tyrek Lannister will be the one that will survive and be the head of House Lannister, but it's Sigil now Sigil now will be horse, as Tyrek is now a horse. Of course, Ken. I like that theory. Chapters in Feast also have a longer page count than the previous books, which also makes the book feel a bit slower plot-wise. Yeah, agreed. Like, for instance, Will, like what I'm talking about, right? It's like Sam's chapters, right? They just go on and on and on. I mean, like, even Brienne chapters, right? Brienne in the beginning, her chapters go on and nothing happens. Like, what George is doing in those early Brienne chapters is painting, like, who Brienne is, what is the main conflict of her character, and all of that. But the problem is there's no plot going on. There's no plot work going on. Like, Brienne doesn't really have a plot, really, until, like, her 4th chapter. So, I definitely agree with you on a lot of that. Depending on what George does with Bran, Sam should be a far more exciting character to read in the next 2 books. Yeah, I agreed. Like, now that Sam is actually in a place where he has a lot of different things he can interact with, there's a lot to uncover. Old Town's a very, like, and House Hightower are very mysterious. You have Jaqen, who's probably here. The Faceless Men are here. There's some information about the dragons or this Maester plot that could be going on. Eurons are in this area. Like, the whole problem, I think, for George was, how do we get Sam to be at Old Town when Euron gets there, but he can't be there too early? That's the problem he has. And so I think, personally, he should have cut down Sam's chapters. Like, and again, even like Theory of Ice and Fire points out, like, you know, a Sam chapter in Bravos is fun. Like, it was fun, but there's a lot of this. This is a lot of what Sam's chapters are. Mace Draymon's dying. We had to buy a bunch of fire. We have no gold. We're sitting around here complaining. Gilly's crying. The baby's crying. Everybody's crying. Everybody's throwing up. Everybody's shitting themselves. Like, it's just like, I don't want to read this over and over and over again. Like, I don't know. I just don't think, I don't think Sam's plotline in this was even necessary. So, hoping Jaime survives the books. He ain't. That's all I'm gonna say. He ain't. Do you rank Feast over Dance? No, I personally, even though I talk up Feast for Crows, I still love this book. I love all of the main Song of Ice and Fire books. I love Fire and Blood, even though it has its flaws. I like, you know, I love the novellas. Like, World of Ice and Fire is good for what it is. But for me personally, Feast, there's plot lines that just take it down for me, that last too long. There's things that, like, I don't think Feast for Crows is a bad book. Like, I've said that over and over again. But I think, to me, I enjoy more things in, like, Dance, for instance, with, like, Theon, with Asha. I think Dance inherently has more things going for it because it gets to, like, wrap up a lot of things from Feast. The Walk of Atonement, Jaime's arc. Like, for my one thing I will say about Jaime is I think he kind of, plot-wise, not character-wise. Character-wise, he ends on a very good note, but plot-wise, he kind of has a weird end to his plot line. I don't know. Agreed, April. I agree. That's kind of how I read that character. I like everything in Feast if he finishes the series. It's a waste of 1,000 pages if he doesn't. I agree. If only we lived in the world where Feast and Dance were one book. That'd be a big book. But yeah. Do you know what Feast definitely lacks? Stannis the Manus. I agree. We only get one chapter with Stannis, and he's not even really in it. Feast is a nice, digressing, slower paced walk through Central Westeros. I mean, agreed. Like, that's kind of what Brienne's whole, like, beginning of her story is. I do think so, Ghost. I do think so, yes. I do think they can be redeemed, more or less, but I don't know, like, that's my thing, is, like, I look at Feast for Crows, and it's a book where you appreciate it more and more as you reread it. Because I am someone that, like, when I look back on the first time I read A Feast for Crows, I was more of a casual, like, reader, or a fan of the series. Like, you know, I liked the books for the most part, I liked the series, but you know, when I first read it, I remember just, like, not really caring about the Dornish plot and not caring about the Greyjoy plot. really focusing on Cersei and Jaime, and again, not really getting too deep into the Brienne stuff. So like, I definitely get why people don't like this book. And even when I did some research, because it's going to be way more in depth when I do my final concluding video on this book. If you Google like any fan like bracket or tier list or ranking of the books, Feast is always last every single time. Like, there are very few lists when I search online and I look up and say this book is number 3, for instance, which I think is crazy because in this community, more of a hardcore community, that again, that's why I find it so interesting to research this topic, because I think more casual people tend to hate this book, and I think the hardcore fan base appreciate it much more. I just find that really interesting. But yeah, so I want to kind of look at my ranking of the POVs. So let me find that real quick. But let me know, if you guys had to rank the POVs of this book, give me what you would rank them. All right. So my rankings for the book for all 13 characters that appear in a POV or are okay, I said that wrong. All 13 characters that have a POV. I ranked number 13 as Eris Oakheart. Again, we only get one POV of him, and he kind of just comes off as an idiot. It's just, again, him being manipulated. It's really like an introductory chapter into Arianne more than it is an Eris chapter. It's more like, it's like a pre-game Arianne chapter. It's a preview of what's to come. And so it's a great chapter in the fact that it's good for Arianne. It's good to kind of continuing on our Dornish plotline, but I don't particularly find the character very interesting. And I think compared to other characters, he's just at the bottom for me. Number 12, I had Areo Hoda. Kind of falls into the same trap of Eris, where it's like he only has one chapter, a very boring POV. He's just basically a look into Duran. He's basically a POV for Duran. He's basically what Davos is for Stannis, except Davos is an interesting character. Like, Areo is not at all. Like, okay, he's a big brutish warrior who doesn't talk and he just observes things. Like, I like the chapter for what it does, but I don't like the character of Areo. Like, it's kind of similar to Bran in the first book, where I don't particularly enjoy the character of Bran, but I enjoy things going on around Bran, like Robb and Jon's relationship in the first chapter, like his relationship with Robb and how he looks into Robb's character. It's kind of our POV into Robb until Catelyn goes and finds him. So, I don't know. Let me read chat real quick. I've never done it that way, a theory of Ice and Fire, but that'd be pretty cool. Hot take, Fire and Blood over Feast. Philip, that's not a hot take. That is not a hot take at all. I think on one of my book rankings, I actually did that. I really like Fire and Blood, so I kind of have a bias with that, though. I liked Sam's scenes at Hornhill and Game of Thrones. Wish it was in the books. Agreed. That would be a really interesting interaction. Jaime is my favorite. Agreed. Jaime as well, yes. So, again, I don't think he has been redeemed yet, right? Like, I think he's on that path, right? Like, he's trying to do better, and so that's what's going to be the big redeeming thing of the book. Like, he's not there yet, right? Like, he's a character we enjoy, we understand more, we like more. But he hasn't, in my opinion, he hasn't been redeemed yet. Will says Cersei, the Ironborn, 3 Jaime, 4 Brienne, and 5 Arya. Okay. Jaime falls again to save Brienne, then has to get redeemed again. Correction, Arya chapters are my favorites in every book, including this one, but there are only 3. Yes, there are only 3. And one thing I'll talk about Arya is, like, Arya is, she's not bad. She's like, if you look at the line, right, that I talked about, where this is a good, solid chapter for A Song of Ice and Fire, pretty much all 3 of her chapters are at the line. Like, none of them are bad, but none of them are like, wow, that was one of the best chapters of the book. That's kind of how I feel about Arya in this book, but we'll continue on. So 11, we already talked about Sam, so we're not going to do another big rant, but he has 5 chapters, which is, I believe, the 4th most. It's the 4th most in the book, and I don't think he's even needed in this book, so that should kind of tell you a lot. 10 I had was Asha. Again, Asha only gets 1 chapter in this book, unfortunately. Her plotline really picks up in the next book, so it's hard to say this is like a POV that's like the best of the book. because he only has one. It's about establishing her character for the King's Moot and getting all of that ready. And so there's not really like a conclusion to her POV. It's just there. It's there to really help amplify the King's Moot. So I can't really put this POV any higher. I guess I could. I could put it above Pate, but I'm not going to. Pate is a great. Pate's story feels like a mini story. Like it feels like almost a Dunk and Egg novella, but very short. Where it's like you have this character that's, you know, George only like has like 20 pages or so, I think, to do this introduction, and it's perfect. You understand the character of Pate. You understand his motivations, some of the things he's struggling with, what he's motivated by. All that's great. But then you also build on the intrigue of Old Town and the intrigue and mystery of the Faceless Men. What are their motivations? What are they after? And so it has huge ramifications on Sam's plotline, Arya's plotline, a bunch of things going on. Dany's plotline going forward with Marwyn and how that's going to develop later. This is a huge chapter, right? Like this chapter establishes a ton going forward. Our introduction to probably, you know, someone that is not named Alaris, is probably Sarella. But, you know, so I really enjoy Pate. Great starting POV. But again, only one chapter kind of holds him back. 8 is Victarion. So Victarion has 2 POVs. Again, first one very similar to Asha, where it's like an introduction to the character, introduction into and building up the mystique of the King's Moot. His chapters get a little bit of a leg up because he has more of a conclusion, right? Like he's sent on this adventure to go find Dany and marry her and take a dragon and all that. And there's more there than Asha, which is why he's higher. 7 and 6. So 7 is Arya, 6 is Sansa. Very similar characters. They don't get a lot of POVs. This is a building time for their characters. And so we don't see a lot of them. But the reason Sansa is ahead of Arya is because Sansa has one of the best books of the chapter, or one of the best chapters of the book in her second chapter, which is basically a Littlefinger just show where he's manipulating the Lord's Declarant and he's doing all that. It's just great. It feels like an OG King's Landing chapter that we really don't see too much of in this book, but it's great in the way that works out. It's really great for her character. I think she's a stronger character in this book than Arya. She has more to do and more to kind of learn, whereas Arya, it's a lot more stuff off screen. So again, it's kind of crazy having 2 of the main POVs this low, but just given how many chapters they have, I think, you know, kind of puts them there. Roose Bolton, Wire Mandalay. More Roose, more Mandalay, of course. Lady Stoneheart forces Jaime and Brienne to lead Second Red Wedding to save each other. That'd be interesting to see how that works out. Arya's chapters are full of info. What we don't realize is information until later, which is ironic in that Arya herself is full of important info that she has no clue she has. Agreed. Who's your favorite character that's still alive? POV and non-POV. So non-POV is Stannis, and then POV, that's a tough one. POV, I would probably say Stannis. Actually, for non-POV, it's either Stannis or Young Griff. Arya. Okay, my bad, April. But yeah, okay. I agree though. Arya, like, all the background information into, like, the Faceless Men. Think about how many people actually know that. There's a lot of interesting things. Hi, Agor. How are you? I can't really say, but I wanted to say happy holidays and long live House Blackfire. Of course, you guys can actually see it now. Because of my desk location, you guys can see my Blackfire thing in the background and my Stannis and yeah, all that over there. So that's pretty cool. But no problem, by the way. Also, I hope you guys enjoyed. I don't know. I haven't seen how R+L videos even doing tonight, but I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Also, I find it ironic. I make a Ned Nashara video, not expecting it to do well, and it's my #1 of the last 10. So I guess thank you guys, even though it's a theory I don't like. And I struggled making that video because I didn't know how to do it in a way that didn't come off as like I was biased against it, but then also not provide the right content. I don't know. That was a very weird video for me to do. But also, May, I am glad, or April, whichever you prefer to be called. I'm glad that you found this community. I'm glad you like the channel. I try my best. Do you think a Roose Bolton POV would be interesting or would feel like filler and drag? It depends what kind of POV would it be. Like, if it was a Roose Bolton POV and, like, it's his death, for instance. Like, Stannis has tricked him and it's his last, POV of the book or something. Or if it was, like, say, the epilogue and it's, like, him dying. That would be really cool. I think that'd be really cool. But yeah, prologue, very good in this book. I agree. Sansa really starts becoming more interesting in this book. I agree. I think she starts to hit her stride. Like, she starts to become more of a character. I know this is a hot take, but Sansa is one of my top characters across the whole series. I don't think that's a hot take at all, Will. Like, I did a bracket or a competition thing with the community on who was their favorite character or their best character, and Sansa ended up winning. I know. She won and then she lost. So put it that way. Boo House Blackfire. Hey, we love House Blackfire. Ashara plus Rhaegar equals Val. Ooh, that's an interesting one. I think Ned saves a child of Rhaegar's at beginning and end of the war. Okay, interesting. What do you think would have happened if in the Purple Wedding everybody dies except Joffrey, Sansa, and Tyrion? How would that even happen, though? Like, Joffrey, okay, depending on what theory you believe, Joffrey or Tyrion was the main target of the wedding. So, like, there wouldn't be a Purple Wedding. So, it would just have been a wedding. How would everybody have died? Can't, like, the context of how everybody dies would add a lot to that conversation. But, yeah, so let's continue. So, looking at my number 5 POV, I have Aeron. And again, Aeron is here almost blatantly because he has the best chapter of the book. The Kingsmoot chapter is by far, in my opinion, the best chapter of this book. It's a top 10 chapter of the entire story for me personally. The way it goes from, like, Aeron is kind of sitting in the background and watching and waiting and just sitting here. The horror of when Euron wins is, it's just an incredible, like, twist. It's an incredible turn where it's like, it's not like the most surprising twist in the world because it's like, of course the villain's going to win. He's the most intriguing. He's been kind of being built up this whole time. Of course he's going to win. But still, it was so intriguing the way George wrote this chapter. I think just based on pure, like, his writing ability, George describes this meeting of people and this crowning of Euron really amazing. So I think that in and of itself is great. I think his introduction in the Greyjoy plot, I really appreciate the more and more I reread it. So again, I think he only has 2 POVs in this book, but both of them are very strong. Number 4, again, Arianne. Arianne has 2 top 10 chapters in this book for me personally. I think the Queenmaker chapter is the number 2 chapter for me of this book. And then her other chapter has another great payoff, right? It's like, okay, we find out everything that Arianne's been dealing with, that it was for the wrong reasons, right? She was trying to crown Myrcella and all this and try to take power on Dorne for the wrong reason. Because she was basically being planned to be the queen of Westeros. And so it's this great, line that we end with, like, fire and blood. And that we're going to have the whole Quentyn plot in the next book. So it's a nice, like, build into that. But again, Arianne, if she had more chapters in this book, would probably be 1 or 2, but only has 2. They're both bangers, right? In my opinion, Arianne basically gets the fruits of the Dornish plot. Like, because of, Aryo and Aerys building that up for her, she basically slam dunked it. Like, she just slam dunked it. I personally don't like the Kingsmoot because it's so long, ending, and no main characters, but it's filled with clues about end story and world. And so for me personally, I just love the different politics that are used, right? Like, you have Asha coming at it with, okay, let's be more progressive, right? Like, let's change the entire Ironborn culture. Whereas you have Victarion, who's more of this traditionalist. He's more of your conservative type where he doesn't want to change. He wants to keep doing what Balon did. And you have this middle ground of Euron, playing on that, right? Being someone that's a great politician, just saying what the people want to hear, which is fantastic. And I like the tension, the writing that's built here. Do you think Qyburn would have been viewed better if he had not sided with Cersei? Probably. I still think though, like, people would view him as a very mysterious character given like what he does. Like, think about his actions. So I don't know. All right, so moving on. Number 3, I have Cersei. Now, Cersei's a hard one to rate because I think if you look at comparing, I'll just say what my top 3 are now. So 3 is Cersei, 2 is Brienne, and 1 is Jaime. So the reason Cersei's below Brienne is because Brienne, at her heights, have way better chapters than Cersei. Like, Brienne's last 4 chapters of this book are all top 15 worthy, whereas Cersei has like 1 or 2 that I consider like top 10 of this book maybe, whereas like she has a lot of like middle ground chapters. So Cersei throughout the book is more consistently written, of like a certain quality, but Brienne is on the opposite spectrum, right? So she's either below the line or way above the line. So Brienne, I just enjoy, I think her moments and her journey through this book are more interesting, more impactful, feel better as a payoff than Cersei's do. Like, Cersei's are great, but Brienne is just better, in my opinion. And then Jaime is just the best, obviously, because there's no dull moment with Jaime. There's no bad chapter for Jaime. We talked about this already. He just by far has the best POV of this book. It's not close to me. Like, there's no competition. If Brienne had been better written, or maybe she had been, her early plot had been condensed down until it wasn't 4 chapters and really long, maybe there was a competition there. But Jaime is just consistently from chapter 1 to chapter 7 of his arc. He is great. Fair enough. I like that analogy, A Theory of Ice and Fire, about the Kingsman. I like that. Also, do you think if Euron ends up destroying the Citadel and wins, it might actually enable Westeros to escape the weird cycle of stagnation, which technology looks like stuck for same for thousands of years? Yeah, it's an interesting idea because it's like, you have this college of, you would assume, better education, but yet medically we're not going forward. We're not making technological progress in general. Ow, I just hit my hand on my desk. Maybe it's the Maesters holding us back from that. It's possible. Or just Old Town in general. That could be possible. But thank you guys all for joining me on, a little Christmas special. Hope you guys all enjoyed. I hope you guys all had a fantastic holiday and day, and as in general. And I'll see you guys all in the next stream or video.